So Donna, one of the words or phrases that has brought us together this afternoon is the whole idea of creating a church without walls. And I wonder if you could give us some of your thoughts very personally about what about that appeals to you, what we should think about in terms of being a church without walls.
Mm-hmm. Well, as I said, as congregationalists, we have been planted in cities for hundreds of years. And I believe over time that there was a time when the entire community was invited into the church, and a lot of activities happened there, whether it was a meeting house or whatever, however you want to look at it. And so I believe that, and I think I said this to you earlier about kind of going back to the future in a way, kind of what was the church really meant to be, and really was meant to be the spiritual center of a whole entire community, not just the people who came to the church. And so the idea of Church Without Walls for us is that we want to invite people to come and explore with us, and to come and connect with us. And in that process, maybe we'll discover new things about each other and ourselves and be transformed by it. And I think that's really what most churches are looking for when they say that church without walls. That's the kind of the idea. But unfortunately, what happens is when we have churches who want to do new things, we tend to take an old idea and attach something new to it, like we were talking about jazz vespers. Now, vespers is a beautiful experience in a church world for people who understand what it is. But for people outside the church, they don't know what that is. So by just saying we're going to have jazz vespers, it doesn't make it an outside, and how would I say it?
It's hard to interpret.
Right, it's hard to interpret and figure out, but it can actually feel very, very exclusive, and without meaning to. I think the intention is to be inclusive by merging those two ideas together. So how do we do it differently? How do you take what we have and maybe offer it in a different way? So you might, and I really don't know, I think every church needs to explore that idea for themselves, and just even raising that question is very helpful. For us, it's a little more than that. We probably wouldn't do something like that.
So while we're on a roll talking about Church Without Walls, I wonder if you could give us a few thoughts about when we have an event, what should we be thinking about beyond that event?
Well, when you have one event, you should always have another one already planned ahead of time. It's called a relay event, and that's the second event. So what we've done, because we were doing outreach, and I was trying to introduce our form of worship to outside people, so we would have an outside event, like we would go apple picking, or we did all kinds of group events outside the church because we didn't have a space. So we did blessing of the animals and blessing of the boats, and we got involved in a fundraiser for a woman who had breast cancer, and they had a motorcycle run for her to raise money. And so they invited us, because they heard a blessing of the boats, they invited us to do blessing of the bikes. And so there was all these fun events that kept emerging out of the next event. And those events actually kept bringing more and more people into relationship with me, and I was able to share this other new event. So on the papers, we would have, apple picking, but it would also say, join us for worship 2 weeks from now at the Buttonwoods Museum. Or we had a Christmas event, and join us at the barn, for this event. So there was always something they could find us the next place. It really worked for us because we had no place to go, and I had to really be very purposeful in creating an event that wasn't religious by any means. It was about relationship and fellowship, and that event inviting people to a worship event. So we'll be doing that with this space. We have to kind of take that information, and how do we put it now that we're landed? How do we continue doing that in a way that's fluid? That doesn't become its own religious experience, or kind of legalistic. I think I fear that more than anything, because we have to do this because we did it for the last 20 years, And so it really has to be an organic experience, and everybody needs to be invited into the process. I highly recommend asset mapping for creating events, because everybody has ideas and knows somebody, and you don't really realize that the connection, how important that is. So I would highly recommend doing an asset mapping night. It's kind of fun too. You have a potluck dinner and just invite everybody to, to put things together and put the sticky things on the wall and see what comes up.